a governing party. In third place, behind the Conservatives, behind Reform, sitting on 17% of the vote with a five-party pile-up so tight you could barely fit a Rizla paper between them. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most extraordinary collapse in modern British political history, and Keir Starmer is right in the middle of it. Welcome back to British Reform. Let's set the scene. January 2026. Most people are still digesting Christmas leftovers and half-heartedly sticking to a dry January. And then a YouGov poll drops for Sky News and The Times, and it is absolutely devastating. Reform UK on 26%, Conservatives on 19%, and Labour, the party that won a landslide just 18 months ago, the party that swept into Downing Street with one of the biggest parliamentary majorities in living memory, sitting on 17%. Third place, behind the official opposition, behind the insurgent party they spent years dismissing as a protest vote. Third place, that's not a dip, that's not a rough patch, that's a full-blown free fall from 33,000 feet without a parachute, and somewhere on the way down someone's passing Keir Starmer a press release telling him to hold his nerve. And here's the really brutal part, it wasn't even a one-off. Labour had previously matched that 17% low back in October. The difference? In October, they were still ahead of the Tories. In January, the Tories overtook them. That's the first time the governing party has slipped behind the official opposition in the polls since the general election. First time ever under this government. Now, let's just take a breath here and appreciate how completely extraordinary this is. In July 2024, Labour won 63% of seats on 34% of the vote. The headlines were all about a historic supermajority, a new era, the end of the Conservatives, morning in Britain. 18 months later, that same party is polling at 17%. The political equivalent of buying the most expensive house on the street and somehow ending up living in a tent in the garden. But hold on, because this gets better. Or worse, depending on which party you support. Look at the numbers around Labour in that poll. The Liberal Democrats on 16%. The Greens on 15%. For the five main parties all within 4 percentage points of each other. 4 points. That is nothing. That is statistical chaos. That is what happens when a two-party system doesn't just crack. It completely implodes. Britain is no longer a two-party country, and the numbers make that undeniable. By March 2026, the combined Conservative and Labour vote share in polling averages had collapsed to just 37%. 37%. At the 2024 general election, which itself was a record low, they combined for 57%. In the space of less than 2 years, the big two have shed 20 percentage points between them. 20 points. Gone. Evaporated. Handed to Reform, to the Greens, to the Lib Dems, to anyone and everyone who isn't wearing a red or blue rosette. And speaking of red rosettes, let's talk about what happened in Gorton. Because if the polling is the warning shot, Gorton is the cannon going off. In a by-election in a constituency Labour had held for more than 90 years, Labour lost half its vote and finished third. The Greens won it with a swing of 28 percentage points, aided by the constituency's large Muslim community and the party's position on Gaza. Reform came second. Labour, third, in a seat they'd held since before the Second World War. That is not a protest vote. That is a political eviction. And here's the thing that should really keep Labour strategists awake at night. It came from both directions simultaneously. Reform ate into Labour's working-class vote on the right. The Greens swallowed their progressive vote on the left. That is the nightmare scenario for any governing party, and it's now Labour's reality. They are being squeezed from both flanks like a particularly unlucky tube of toothpaste, and there's very little left in the middle. Now what about Keir Starmer personally? Because it's one thing for the party to poll badly. It's another thing entirely when the leader's approval ratings suggest that even the people who voted for him have stopped waving at him across the road. Labour MPs began publicly questioning his future. John Trickett told Times Radio that Starmer doesn't represent Labour values. Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, former leadership hopeful, the man who actually has a fan base, was reportedly eyeing a potential challenge. The Labour NEC blocked him from standing in the Gorton by-election, which is the political equivalent of your own teammates not letting you on the pitch. Starmer went into cabinet and told his ministers to hold their nerve, which is exactly what you say when the nerve is absolutely gone. You don't tell people to hold their nerve when things are fine. You tell them to hold their nerve when you are staring down a cliff edge together and someone at the back has already started running. So what is driving all of this? Because it's not complicated. People are fed up. The cost of living is still brutal. Energy bills are still eye-watering. The NHS is still under enormous pressure. And voters who gave Labour a once-in-a-generation majority to fix things are looking at their bank accounts and their waiting lists and their crumbling public services and thinking, this was supposed to be different. That's the gap between expectation and reality that is swallowing Labour's vote share whole. Meanwhile, reform keeps motoring, polling consistently between 26 and 32% nationally, established as the undisputed dominant force on the right of British politics. And with the May local elections now weeks away, projections are pointing to historic gains, potentially over 2,000 council seats, at Labour and the Conservative Party's expense. Essex, Norfolk, Suffolk, county councils that have never seen reform anywhere near power, are now in play. Former Red Wall Labour heartlands like Hartlepool and Wigan are looking increasingly purple on the electoral map. What happens on May the 7th is going to echo. It's going to shape leadership conversations. It's going to shape the narrative heading into the next general election. It's going to tell us whether this polling collapse is a blip or whether British politics has permanently reorganized itself around a new fault line, one where reform sits at the top and the old parties are left arguing over the scraps. We will be covering every single development between now and polling day, and on the day itself, right here on British Reform. If you want to stay ahead of every twist, every shock result, and every moment the political map gets redrawn in real time, subscribe, hit the bell, and we'll see you in the next one.